Hello, everyone. Welcome for another Mysterious Galaxy virtual event. I'm Nick, the director of events. We have another spooky event on October, the most spookiest month ever. Come on. I present to you three wonderful authors, Sara Farizan, YAMILE Saeed Méndez, and Amparo Ortiz. Hello, everyone.
Hi. Trick or treat, everybody.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I want chocolate.
Yeah.
So everyone is on the same page. Sara is an Iranian American writer, avid vulture, I love that, an ardent basketball fan who was born in and lives near Boston. She is also award-winning author of If You Could Be Mine and Here to Stay. YAMILE Saeed Méndez is a football-obsessed Argentine-American. Is it Argentine or Argentine?
I say Argentine, but it doesn't.
Argentine.
As long as you don't say Argentinian, I'm okay.
There's so many different movies that say it different ways. Anyway, Argentine-American and the author of FURIA, an inaugural Walter Dean Myers Grant and New Visions Award honor recipient. She's also a graduate of Voices of Our Nations, also known as VONA, and Vermont College of Fine Arts in MFA in Writing for Children and Young Adult program. Last but not least, Amparo Ortiz is the author of Blaze Wrath Games and Blood Dragon Ring, of which we were honored to have virtual events for as well. When she's not teaching ESL, she's streaming K-pop videos, vlogging for eponymous YouTube channel, and writing worlds both contemporary and fantastical.
Yay!
In the spookiest of month, we have, of course, their latest books, Dead Flip and Our Shadows Have Claws, 15 American Monster Stories.
Look at those covers together. They actually match.
They do. Like we have a...
Algonquin said yes, they will match.
Yeah, I was going to say, we must
That was on purpose.
or something.
We have our events book display in the front of the store, and these two together, I was like, they color-wise and like style-wise, it looks like they were meant to be like together.
Yeah,
Just, you know, size-wise, you know. One is obviously the older child.
Wow.
Yes, a little taller.
At least I'll be taller in some situations.
Yes, exactly.
For those of you who have yet purchased the books, if you click the link below if you're watching this live, that'll take you to our webpage where you can purchase these books as well as other books by the authors. And while supplies last, you will get signed book plates. Some of our book plates are still waiting in transit, but we will get them somewhat soon. So please hold with. We'll make sure you get your book plates either shipped with your book or we'll ship them separately if they don't come in on time. And also, if you have any questions you would like to ask the authors, I see someone has already found the question button. You can submit your questions under the Ask a Question button below. About halfway through the program, I'll pop back on and ask those. All right, I'm going to disappear for now, but I'll leave it for these three wonderful authors to take it away. See you later.
Thank you.
Hi. Thank you. Hi.
Hello.
It's an honor to be here with you. Thank you for a great book. And
You're welcome, and also thank you.
for the occasion, I
Oh my God!
I love
it.
you know,
Where did you get those? I mean, I
Um,
can imagine.
you
But
know,
I'm just
for the talk, just to express how much I enjoyed.
I'm moved.
wait. Don't move. I'm taking a screenshot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm also going to use it for my Halloween costume next week, which I'll mostly for
That's
this.
amazing. Oh my
I
goodness.
found it on Etsy, so
Oh,
Incredible.
Etsy is
So
that
what are you
kind
going
of-
to
yeah.
do for Halloween, Sarah?
I'm going to be Michael J. Fox and Teen Wolf.
That's appropriate.
Like
Yes.
before he transitions, so like it's just his basketball jacket and his claws. Yeah.
That makes sense.
So
Oh my
great.
gosh.
and a basketball and like some shorts. This is him fully transitioned.
Oh my God. I literally haven't seen that movie in so long.
Yeah,
Like,
Like watching
it's, there's some, you know, maybe it wouldn't hold up in some ways today, but it's
True.
It's implanted there. I love it.
Yes.
and I remember like there's a lot of, not a lot, but there's some discussion about Ralph Macchio in Dead Flip that I was like sent back in time just because
good.
I grew up like knowing about the Karate Kid, but I've literally, confession time, I've never seen the whole movie.
Second,
Oh, you must.
Ever.
Oh, you must. It's
have you watched the new series though?
I haven't.
Cobra Kai? Yeah.
No. I mean,
great.
I know about it. My family watches it, and I'm like, good for them.
No,
I think watch the first. I like the first movie and the second one. Third one is okay. You don't have to watch all of them, but it helps to then appreciate Cobra Kai so much more. So
Progressively, everyone always says it's okay. Like it's fine. It's fine.
Yeah. It's,
in a franchise, it's just it happens, and rarely it's like it's better than the first 3 or 4. You know.
Yeah, sequels are hard.
They are
continuations of a franchise.
Yes, but I love that Amparo is bringing up the reference in the book, because since your book is set in, I mean, it's a dual timeline in the
yes, I think that's the best way of saying it.
Yes. So that can be so tricky with kids to get references, but how lucky that, I mean,
yes,
kids have Cobra Kai and they know who these people are from the 80s and 90s, and there's this huge revival of, which is so strange to me. That's when I was
well, I think in the first draft they were like, Dead Flip is set in 1987 and 1992. And so it's the backdrop of the story. So there are a lot of pop culture references that hopefully, I don't think all kids will get. I think they'll have to Google it, or just
those are for us.
Yes. I think there's some that people in their 30s and 40s and possibly 20s who also read YA, which is great, will have a good time with. But speaking of the 80s and 90s, did you all have any favorite 80s or 90s like horror media, or like do you remember as a young kid, like the first time that like a horror story got you, whether it was a book or a TV show or a film?
It was definitely movies for me. Yeah, no, don't take them off. Like they're
just perfect. I'm obsessed.
Well, for me, it was Freddy Krueger and Jason Voorhees movies.
Oh, wow.
I was way too young to start watching them when I watched them, and I think it's because my father has no shame, and that's all he watched, like horror movies all the time. It would be me going from Wizard of Oz to Nightmare on Elm Street. It was just even though the Wizard of Oz did scare me, like the witch, the Wicked Witch, and the monkeys, the flying monkeys, I was legitimately scared. But I don't remember anything other than those specific properties when I was a child.
Yeah. But The Wizard of Oz is a horror movie in a way. I mean, it really it's scary.
It's wrong.
And
how I would describe it.
The Return to Oz, which I've never seen.
Oh, I think I've seen it.
80s. It's with Fairuza Balk, and people are like really traumatized by that.
She's a phenomenal actress.
She's great. I love her in The Craft. Yeah.
That's like the greatest witch movie, mostly white witch movie of all time.
Except for Rachel True, who was holding it down.
Oh, yes, exactly.
Well, I think The Wizard of Oz is kind of like a horror story in a way, because it has so many bizarre elements combined.
Yes, yeah.
That it kind of feels like a fever dream or a nightmare.
Yeah.
And so then when you're a kid and you go to sleep, your mind, like
goes to town
by some aspects, and I don't know. So that's why it can be super scary. So I also grew up. I had a romance panel earlier today, and I said,
appropriate.
How I read Thornbirds when I was 11.
Wow, really? Did you watch the
miniseries?
Wow. Scandalous.
Living dangerously.
That's also horror, but
yeah.
The horror genre for me was the Salem Slot miniseries again. That I was way too young to watch. But in Argentina, back in those olden times, we had 2 channels, and you watch what you watched. So my brother and I were sent to sleep, and then of course we, tiptoed back into the kitchen and watched from the hallway. And I happened to just step into the kitchen in the moment that the vampire boy is hovering outside the window. that still traumatizes me to this day. If I have to open a window or close the shutters at night, I when I was a kid, I had to do it during the daytime because I was convinced that if I did it after the sun, came down, I would just to sleep with the window open because there's no way I was gonna put my hand out the window in the
There's
dark.
gonna be a little boy floating outside.
Yes,
Nothing to do.
and then my brother started sleeping like this.
Oh,
He didn't have a cross. Like I did because I went to a Catholic school, so I had my rosary from my first communion. So I slept with my rosary like this.
Wow. That's
but
intense.
you were ready. Yeah,
Yes.
Yes.
you were ready.
Yes.
And I feel like those experiences shaped all of us.
Yes. And then, I found Stephen King's books.
Mhm.
And then I went through, the typical teenage vampire movies, Bad Boys, and several others that I don't know the titles in English.
Oh, the Lost Boys, you mean?
The Lost
Vampires.
Boys. Yes, Bad
I've
Boys.
never seen that movie either.
Yes.
Hang on.
Because like they
These are
translated
the Lost
Oh my
Boys.
goodness.
that.
Sorry, you can see the ring light, but those are the
It was mine. I'm uncovered.
There's like
those are the that's he scared me so much. Kiefer Sutherland as David
Yes.
was so
He-
scary.
I think
Why-
he's always gonna be that character for me, even though I've never seen the movie. Like visually, I just associate him with vampirism,
Yeah.
even though I've seen him in so many things. I think my other favorite movie that I've seen him in is Dark City. I don't know if you've
Oh,
heard
yes.
of that
Yeah.
one.
Really,
I mean,
with
I
Connolly, yeah.
that movie is weird in itself, but the fact that I only saw him in that movie and then I remembered that he was a vampire, like that says a lot about his face.
Yeah. Well, he's also Ace, the like bully in Stand By Me.
I have not
so
seen
he's
that
had
either.
so he's had a bunch of like
We're gonna have to have it.
oh yeah, an 80s night. I'll be happy to
Yes.
join you.
I feel like
Just-
that's like my biggest lack is 80s horror movie knowledge.
Oh, happy to be a guide. So mine was a lot of I think I was too scared. Like when you were talking about Freddy and Jason and Salem's Lot, I'm like, that's too scary for me.
Yeah,
my
especially
way
Freddy.
my way in was horror comedies. So we're talking Ghostbusters, Gremlins.
Oh, amazing. Yes.
Lost Boys had comedic elements. The Monster Squad, which is on my shirt.
Oh my goodness, yes. I do remember the Monster Squad.
And
I
they're
used to watch the Abbott and Costello movies also, now that I'm remembering. But that's way earlier. Oh my
excuse my
goodness.
ring light. Yeah. So I've just had this stuff on the brain for a long time.
Yes.
That's amazing. Because I feel like, yeah, I mean, my father would watch like these really horrific movies and then Abbott and Costello.
Oh yeah.
Uh-huh.
But
I'm like, what is happening?
yeah, I feel like comedy and horror are like two sides of the same coin.
Yes.
They're both eliciting like a big reaction, and if you don't get that reaction, then it's not going to work. And also, it's a lot about timing, right? So the comedy, you have to have the setup, and then same thing with horror, you have to have the suspense, and then look at I love these. I'm gonna wear these.
It worked perfectly.
People will really take me seriously when I just
Yes, they should.
Oh, I love it.
So let's talk about your book. It started with a tweet.
Yes.
And then you two were like, yeah, let's do it. But did you know like who you wanted to contribute? There are 15 stories by different authors. And did you know who you wanted to have be involved, or did they just kind of come to you? And
It was 50-50. I mean, I feel like
oh wow, okay.
there were people that we wanted to invite because they were very good at writing horror.
Mhm.
And luckily they said yes, but at the same time, Shamile and I were like, should we invite people that we admire but haven't really written horror before?
Yeah.
Like, would they be game for that? Because I know horror as a reader and a writer is, quite particular. Not everyone is willing to jump in, especially if they don't have prior publishing experience. It's like, well, I don't know if this is going to be scary. We got a lot of those emails. I don't know if this is scary. Why am I speaking like a Southern woman? Like, anyway. Yes, because no one in the lineup is actually a Southern white woman. But anyway, it was just like really important for us to not limit ourselves and think outside of the box. But I think Yamile is definitely the one person I would credit with most of the contributor list.
Okay.
Oh, you give me
the
too
big
much
brain. That's Yamile.
No, you gave me too much credit. But yes, it was 50,
Not at all.
and then we had the boon of being able to invite Julia Alvarez and for her to be part of it, and that was another wonderful surprise. We have some writers like Claribel Ortega who writes scary middle grades, which is a completely
Ghost
different
Squad.
Yes, and
Witchlings, yeah.
And then her story was perhaps the scariest for me. Like,
yeah, really
devastated me.
with Junior, and yeah, it was.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. And actually, speaking of Claribel's story, I feel like that story and Dead Flip have the similarity for me in the sense that there is a minor, I don't want to say child, but there's a minor who is essentially taking on the role of someone who is more responsible, more mature, but out of grief. And I feel like when you look at Corey, for example, in Dead Flip, I related to that specific plight more because I would have been angry too. And I would have been like, you know what? I don't want to deal with this anymore. This loss that we both share, Maz and Corey, are like, it's fine. I'm not going to deal with it. Like, I'm going to move on with my life, but from a place of grief and rage, which I think is very freeing and cathartic to write.
Yeah, it was fun writing. So in Dead Flip, it's basically about three childhood best, for those of you who don't know. It's about three childhood best friends. So Corey, I'll point them out. Corey, since I have the claw, Maz, and Sam. And
Sam.
So when they're all childhood best friends since kindergarten. And then when they are in that going into 7th grade, like kind of that middle school years when you're outgrowing some friends emotionally. On Halloween of 1987, Sam goes missing. And Corey and Maz kind of split ways because of grief, but also life takes them in different directions in different schools. And then when they're both seniors in high school, Maz is like a himbo jock who has a problem. Corey,
that's maybe why I related to him less.
Yeah. Corey is a homecoming queen nominee, very popular, pretty femme girl who is a closeted lesbian and keeps her childhood hobbies to herself, like horror movies and monster makeup and that kind of thing. And then Sam shows up in their lives again. And he's still 12, which is the age he went missing. And so Corey and Maz have to reconnect and figure out why he's back. And also it may be because of a pinball machine that may or may not be eating people. And Sam maybe isn't telling them everything about why he's back. And, you know, you have to read it to find out. But anyway, so Corey and writing that kind of like, you know, kind of like, why do I have to be the babysitter here? Is it because I'm the girl? Like a lot of their friendship is like the traps of girlhood in a lot of ways, and how she's like, I used to love the things that you guys loved, but there was all this messaging she's getting that you can't be that way once you reach a certain age. Like, you can't talk about Ghostbusters anymore, or if you want to be safe in 1992. And she's getting that messaging from her older sister and society. So I think for her, it was fun to write someone who's like, I've had it, but she also knows all these horror stuff. So she's the one who's like not trusting Sam. And Maz is just totally in. He's like, my friend's back. This is great.
Yeah.
Like, who cares where he's been or why he's this is awesome.
Look at him. He's the same age.
Yeah, and my grief. And
Corey's like, but that's weird.
So it's horror as metaphor of like literally outgrowing a friendship.
Which is painful to read about, actually.
Yeah.
Speaking
of grief, I noticed there was a lot of grief in a lot of the stories. Like it was there were joyful moments also, but there are a lot of characters going through something very deep, like they're grieving a loved one. One of my favorite stories, I have to find it. It was with the grandmother. I'm not giving it away, but there's a grandmother who is decapitated.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yamile's reaction was like, yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah, she was.
yeah. Do you remember who wrote that one? I'm sorry, I'm forgetting.
And Davila Cardinal.
Yes.
Los
And
Desmembrazos.
Yeah.
it was such a, that's a specific one I'm thinking of, but like you're going through the grief of losing your grandmother, and what that looks like and feels like. And a lot of the stories have elements of that, a loss of a loved one, or you can't be with your romantic partner, or things of that nature. And the horror kind of like comes out of the grief, or is a metaphor for grief, or can kind of make the grief worse or consume it, because you have to worry about like a vampire or whatever else.
Yeah.
Did you find that was like just an organic thing that people came to, or like were you surprised by it that so many of the stories like had that element?
You know how it is.
People were traumatized.
Yeah, these events, when you start talking about, the stories, and I hadn't thought about it that way, but now I'm seeing that thorough line in pretty much all of the stories in one way or another. And my one explanation is that we wrote the stories in 2020.
Yes.
And so we were, in a
Yes.
way, even unconsciously, perhaps, trying to, come to terms with the world. Either, because some of us lost family members to the pandemic or other situations, or because,
Things were sad. Yeah.
exactly, everybody around us was grieving, and so those feelings resurfaced. But I'm just fascinated how everybody wrote about it through such a different angle and perspective, and what the character did with that grief, and how it transformed them, or made them angry, or made them, more understand and brave. How, I guess, in the end, the one unifying message of all these characters that are dealing with grief is how they can be stronger than the grief in one way or another, even if they don't find a happy ending, like our character in The Other Side of the Mountain. He's looking for his sister,
Right.
like, I don't want to spoil it for readers, but even if he doesn't have a happy ending, he had a character arc, and he was courageous through his grief, and he was gonna do something so that they wouldn't lose another family member. So I think that was pretty organic, and that's something that I didn't see as we were working through the stories. But then, when all the stories were together, reading it as a whole book instead of separate stories, that kind of shows.
Yeah.
And I love that the same thing happens in Dead Flipped as in our anthology. The fact that none of the stories are entirely rooted in, something is going to get us. There's heart that feeds every choice. There is heartbreak that causes people to move along in the plot, or the plot to move along. And I feel like one of the bravest things you can do is accept that you are heartbroken, because no one wants to look that directly in the face and say, oh my God, like, I miss my grandmother, I miss my friend, I miss my life, I miss the way things were. And it's something that a lot of people try to avoid facing because it's just too painful. And I feel like the best horror, the best horror will always be rooted in that. Yeah. Yes. It's like, it's scarier to me than like Freddy Krueger coming after me, although I don't want that. Just putting that out into the universe. I do not wish.
I can't do it. The idea
absolutely of, not. I'm like laying there like, okay, just whatever. I'm done.
The idea of falling asleep and something coming in your dreams, and
just do it.
Yeah. For many, many years, I was afraid of Chucky from Child's Play. Like, as a child.
Yes.
And I call it smiling evil. So it's a genre where they're like toys or dolls or clowns or children that are
joyful
like
things.
Yeah. Which you have some in Our Shadows Have Claws.
Yes.
Fun. But for a long time, I was afraid of Chucky. Like, never would watch it. Like, if I saw him in a commercial, I would freak out. Like,
it's like, thank you.
When I was 24, I worked at this comic book store that sold all kinds of merchandise. And there was a Chucky doll in the store. Daytime, it was fine. Like, there are people around. Like, you don't have to go there. But sometimes at night, like, I would have to help close the store.
No.
The manager was like counting the cash and like whatever.
And Chuck is just there.
I have to vacuum certain places. And so the Chucky area, either I would go and like vacuum real fast and like get
I wouldn't vacuum it.
Not vacuum.
Exactly. Like, that's the perfect excuse to not do my chores.
And like not vacuum it. And the manager would be like, so you got everything? I'd be like, yep, got everything. Spick and span. So I'm sure that one area was just so dirty.
Nobody vacuumed it.
Yeah. So I went to my mom and I was like, at 24, I was like, will you watch this movie with me? Because I have to get over it. And watching it with her, watching horror movies with her in general is great because she just doesn't care. She's like, doesn't care. Like, she doesn't like it. Like, but she'll be like, that stupid doll. I would just kick it. So then I was like, all her commentary through the movie, I was like, oh, okay. Were there moments when you were, I guess, so I've been in short story collections and very fortunate to be, but never edited. But as a writer who's had that experience, and I don't know if you guys have too, writing for a short story. Well, you did in this book. How was it to edit yourselves and your stories when, like, did you edit each other's work?
We did. And it was so, it was such an amazing learning experience for me. I think I learned about writing the most when I'm editing somebody else's work, because sometimes I just have these blinders and to my own work, and I don't see the same flaws that I fall into that are easier to see in somebody else's. At the same time, I was just blown away. I just love Amparo's voice. That first line is just brilliant, and we're both pretty committed to the craft. So I was never afraid that she was going to be offended by any feedback.
No, you're professionals.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But you never know. Some people get offended. Yes. Or, they push back a little on your comments. Because,
wow.
It's easier because, like with an editor, with an official editor, there's like an authority, and I guess when there's two writers editing, I don't know, you don't get that authority in a way. So
I think you do,
especially not with my notes, because my notes are all like in all caps, exclamation marks. I'm like, this is brilliant. It's like great editing. Amparo, you did a fantastic job critiquing that.
I think that can be hard when they're like 15 stories, right? So they're all different personalities, all people that have different stuff they need to, and different styles. And so figuring out how to communicate with every person is different.
And in my case, Sarah Alper, I believe we share Sarah as an editor. Yeah. I feel like her and Yamile had this vendetta against me because my short story it ended in like a more tragic way. And they were both like, no, this is the way. I don't know why I'm talking like that, but this is the way, Amparo. You should write this ending. And I'm like, but that ending is very different from the one I thought was correct. And then when I wrote it, I was like, they're right.
Yeah. But it wasn't a vendetta. Just guided.
Yes, it just felt like it for a little bit.
So.
Yes, but they actually, that was something that I had always felt writing was supposed to be. You share your work and it no longer belongs to you. Yeah. And I was wondering if you had that moment or had those moments when you were editing Dead Flip. By the way, was that always the title? Did you always have Dead Flip as the original title?
The original title. I've never kept any of my original titles, which is for the best. All the working titles. Yeah. The original working title was Friends Forever.
Oh, that is definitely not screaming horror at me, but it's very sweet.
If it's in the right font, it's like Friends Forever,
Yeah, okay. Like I used to own this too forever.
Yes.
But the marketing team, I think when Randall was still there, came up with Dead Flip because,
Amazing.
There is a demonic pinball machine in the book.
Yes.
And Dead Flip is a pinball move, like when you're not moving the flippers, but you use it.
I do that all the time.
The ball to ricochet, and
Yeah.
And it works for what it is because they thought he's dead. He's not. So, it was great. And I felt so bad because there is this great guy named Jack Danger, and he has a Twitch channel called Dead Flip.
Oh.
He plays different pinball machines on Twitch, and then people like comment and like edge him on. So when he saw like Google notifications Dead Flip, he was like, I hope it's dedicated to me. And so I like messaged him like, I'm so sorry. This happens, like things.
Wow.
You know, it's been really nice because I sent him copies and
amazing.
yeah, so I hope pinball fans like it. I mean, I don't know. It's not to say that all pinball machines are demonic. Just have one.
Exactly.
They attract demons and monsters because we have a story with a pinball machine.
Yes, well, Lilium's story too with the Pac-Man,
yes,
which I loved so much, and I also wondered like when you get all the authors together, and as a short story person, like have been asked to do it, like they have you send a pitch. Right. Yeah. And like kind of what the characters' names are and what genre and whatever. And I remember getting notes like we already have someone named Molly, or we already have were you guys like we already have too many vampires, or we already have like too many of this kind of thing. Like, did you have to think about who was going to write what, or ask people like, you know, we do already have like shape-shifting creatures, like were those kind of discussions in place? Wow.
I mean, in the case of, we have, I would say 3 stories that explore a version of what we know to be the werewolf, which would be the Mulit sisters story. It would be M. Garcia Peña's story and Courtney Alameda's story. So those are wolfish creatures and are similar, very similar to what we consider the werewolf. And we did have, but Yamile had a brilliant idea in the sense that we would take contributors from different countries within Latin America. So even if we have the same creature or myth, we could explore it in a different way somehow, because we're not all writing from the same time periods or from the same cultures. Even though we share a lot, we are not the same. And I thought that was brilliant of Yamile. I was like, you know what? I didn't really think that we could do like a map with the stories that we are introducing. And in the case of, I do believe we had 2 authors who had the exact same creature, but they were from the exact same country. Yeah. So we did have to change that there. Yeah.
What was the country? And then they had to.
It was the Dominican Republic.
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
And we were just like, oh, this is a great myth, but it's the exact same way to present the creature. And it was like, yeah, we can't have that.
I think it was, I could be wrong. It was Alexandra Villasante's story. Was that the creature that just takes people in a bag?
Yes.
Like just bag, snatches them up. It was like, that's very scary.
That's not a good person.
She presented it because it's set in the 70s in Uruguay. Yes. Argentina had the same, not the same, but was going through a dictator at the same time. And both countries that are, you know, were neighboring countries, so we have pretty much the same history. We're going through this period of like literal terror that people disappeared. Like in Argentina was 30,000, in Uruguay were thousands also. But then, you know, they just framed the people's disappearance on this creature that kids are warned about when they're little. So when the adults start disappearing, you know, like, oh my gosh, that's terror for a young person when you think, you know, the adults in your life are going to be safe because they have to protect you, but they're gone.
Yeah.
That was incredible. So yeah.
I don't remember much about Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, the musical movie. I do remember the guy with who's like snatching up children. So I just kept thinking of him with just a giant bag and being like, that's terrifying.
Yes.
I do remember, I haven't seen that one either because I'm special.
You're not missing. I mean, well, I think some people enjoy it. I'm not a musical person. They're so long.
Oh.
Although, R.I.P. Angela Lansbury. I really liked
Yeah.
Sticks. That was a good one.
Oh,
Yeah.
That was a loss. I mean, my father also loved Murder, She Wrote.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
I mean, I swear my dad is the reason why I enjoy horror so much and just thrillers and like strange things, detective stuff. It's his fault.
It's so funny that Murder, She Wrote was like billed as like family entertainment when literally there's a dead body in every episode. They're like, yeah, but it's not a violent death, you know, they're just a body. And if I don't know, like I love Angela Lansbury, but if she kept coming around, I'd be like, I am moving out of this cabin.
Yes.
People just dead for like years and years. They're just dead.
It's like time
goodbye.
It's hair.
Yes.
I also wanted to ask about how you guys decide what order a story should come in. I feel like it's like for anyone young in here, it's like a mixtape.
Yes.
It's a mix. Oh my gosh. When I read when I read about mixtapes and Dead Flip, I lost my entire chill. I was like, it just brought me back to great times in my life. I used to make a lot of mixtapes.
Oh.
But the story order is definitely Yamile, and Sarah, our editor, as well.
And you too. It was kind of easy to decide on the first one because the way that Chantel's story starts, it's like an introduction to everything. And so when we read her story, we said, this has to be the first one. And then we wanted to vary the tone. So we didn't want super tragic and gory, you know, back to back. We wanted to, or same countries together, a little bit of variety. And then we try to be, you know, humble and not be first or last and give our computers
humility.
Yeah. And so
and the voice also, because you mentioned tone, but I think that my story and, you know, Raquel Marie, who writes La Pata Sola, I think that our stories are similar in the sense that it feels very young. Like I feel like they're the most young feeling stories in the collection. And less ragey ones, I feel also, or less like grieving ones. And we knew that we wanted them. I believe mine is right before hers. And then everything comes back to the more heavy aspects of grief and more heavy aspects of identity. It's like, who am I when I don't have this, or when I don't understand that, or when I don't have this answer, etc. But it was mostly Yamile and Sarah being like, okay, I think that Chantel has to be this one. And I'm like, absolutely agree. And then I was like, I have no idea what else to do now. I'm like, everyone, just put everyone, which is obviously what we did. But I'm like, just put everyone.
Now, do you think you'll both continue to write horror again? And do you think that you'll collaborate again on an anthology?
Well, our agent is in this chat.
Look away. I'm kidding.
Linda, cover your ears. But we would love, just throwing it out there, a second, you know.
Manifestation.
Yeah, do it.
With like a second volume, because we didn't cover all the countries. And we'd like more stories from the indigenous nations of Latin America, which we only had one that just strictly indigenous, Ari Tizon's story. She's from Costa Rica, and and so we have Chile, we have Bolivia and Peru and the Guyana, Venezuela, so
Colombia, I think.
We have one Colombia, but we could have more.
Yeah, I think Brazil also has so much like road to pave there. I feel like it's just, first of all, one of the biggest countries in the world, and also just like some people who are struggling to see good representation, because it's not the same as, for example, I'm Puerto Rican, and I can say the amount of times that I've seen Puerto Ricans on film or in books that are all like terrible, you know, like for XYZ reasons. And it's like, I feel the weight is not necessarily on our shoulders, but publishing in general should be more willing to accept that these voices are wanted, needed, and they are not always going to say the same thing. So definitely volume 2.
So Linda said I'd go for a part 2. Oh my goodness.
Yes. Oh my gosh, yes, Delia, correct. And a Spanish
Before we go to
translation.
questions, what about you, Sarah? Will you continue writing?
Yes. I mean,
Oh,
this
gosh.
book definitely, the ending allows for that
Maybe not.
potential sequel there.
Listen,
Yeah.
if enough readers purchase Dead Flip, maybe not tonight, but I hope you purchase from the Mysterious Galaxy at any
Yes.
time.
Yes, tonight.
Yes.
Or you tell 5 friends who like a
Yeah.
book ages 12 and up.
I know so many people who would love a copy of this book. So
Yeah.
don't worry about
Let
those
me
5.
know and I'll try and send it. I'll get my own sales up,
Yes.
copies.
You
And
just
then if
described
you
publishing.
like it, I'm very happy. Dead Flip 2 flipped out.
Yes.
Oh, I love
I
it.
love that. Title already in the works.
Yeah.
Dead
Well,
Flip 2, the flippening.
Yeah.
Flip 2. No, I'm sorry. Dead 2, Flip 2.
Yeah.
To the to flip.
Too
Second
too
life.
flip, too dead to flip,
Yes.
too legit to quit.
Extra Life. Dead Flip 2 Extra Life.
That'd be fun.
All right, we have some audience questions, and for everyone watching out there, don't forget you still have time to submit if you would like. Click the ask question below, submit, and we will ask those. First one up, YAMILE and Amparo, how did you decide upon the writers you wanted to include in your anthology? So how did you decide who you wanted?
I think a lot of people initially were excited to participate and they sent in their pitches. And YAMILE and I evaluated those pitches and said, we want everyone in this collection, every single person. And then YAMILE had the brilliant idea that we should represent different countries within the Latin American region, but specifically countries that we haven't seen on shelves in horror yet.
Excellent. And I love that. This is definitely something that I think we need still, even to this day, more of. We're getting wonderful horror from people of color, and we just need more because it's been too long that we have not.
Yes, and I always bring up this subject when we're talking, Amparo. You'll be like, okay, she's gonna go ahead and talk about the South American.
Okay, it's your night. It's okay. You're the talent. You can talk about
You know,
it.
sometimes when people think about Latina stories, they immediately think about magical realism, which is valid, but that's like a literary, I'm gonna say genre. Although it's literary for people that started in the 70s with good reason, when our countries were going through these dictatorships. But the works coming out of Latin America today are mostly horror, and they're supremely exquisite horror, like Tender is the Flesh, Our Share of Night, that barely came out in English, by Mariana Enriquez, 7 Empty Houses by Samantha Schweblin. And I'm just naming all Argentine women, but we have Silvia Moreno Garcia, who's Mexican-Canadian. Her horror books are incredible. So for a genre that's usually, represented by men, I feel like the women of Latin America are certainly representing horror. And it's been just super fun to read and watch, and read the social commentary and the breadth and depth of these works is just incredible and inspiring.
Excellent. Love it. Sarah, question for you.
Oh, wow. Gosh.
Was there
so much.
Was there a least favorite scene you wrote for Dead Flip?
Oh, it was all a joy. I think it was just so fun because I was writing. I mean, I always write for myself, but I think my first 3 books were a lot of stuff I wanted to get off my chest, and a lot more emotionally. I mean, Dead Flip is emotional too, but again, with horror as metaphor, it's a book about a pinball machine that eats people, right? So it's not as emotionally trying as my first 3 novels, I think. So this one, it was just so much fun to write Sam really wanting to just play with his friends and be kind of he's sort of like Rhoda from The Bad Seed, if anyone's familiar with that play and movie. Rhoda is like a blonde girl with pigtails who like is super sweet, but like maybe killed her classmate. And then he's also
relate.
Yeah, he's also a mix of like Bart Simpson and like a kid from the Village of the Damned put together. So it was just so fun.
That makes so much sense now.
Yeah, he's an amalgamation of a lot of things. So it was just so fun to write him, like being how he's 12, right? He's now interacting with like Corey and Maz. And when he first sees Corey, he's like, wow, you got boobs, which is like rude, but it's like his best friend is now 17, 18. And
Yes.
he's like, and then having the friends that like you had from childhood sort of be like mom and dad, like divorced mom and dad, having to like talk to him and be like, when he's like, well, you guys aren't friends anymore. And like basically having Sam in scenes where he's recognizing who they were as children and reminding them of who they were as children and trying to get them back to where they were. And I think one of the saddest scenes to write was like, I don't want to give it away, but there's a scene in which a middle school dance that I think is very, I don't know, really hit the heartstrings. But
well,
yeah, it was such a joy to write, and I hope to write more stuff like this.
awesome.
Definitely want you to do that.
Thanks.
Yamile and Amparo, how did you both decide upon the level of horror your book would go into? Did you test the stories on yourselves or friends to see it would give them any nightmares?
No, we didn't. We just our contributors free reign to, like spice their stories as much or as little as they chose. And horror is a spectrum and something that for me would not be scary at all. Like, I don't care if there's a spider, I'll kill it with my hand. But if my daughter sees a spider, she faints, So it's the same with stories. Some that for me are not that scary. They were scarier for Amparo or Sarah, our editor. Yeah. And so it's just super subjective. What do you think, Amparo?
I agree. And I feel like sometimes I would tell Yamile, read faster. And Yamile like telling me, read faster, hurry up, read this, hurry. And it was because we were both like figuring out how to pretend we were brave while we were reading some of these.
All right. Then for Sarah, did you have any teens read Dead Flip so you could see if they would get some of the 80s, 90s references?
I did not. I should have. I've never done that, and I should. But I think if what pop culture these days has taught us, like Stranger Things and Cobra Kai, and there's certainly an appetite for nostalgia among people our age. But I think also like kids, what's old is new again. Like there's some people who like never left. And I think there's some things that like, when they watch Stranger Things, like they're fine with the music, or like Kate Bush, obviously they love, but like didn't hear about before.
They didn't know anything about Kate
So
Bush.
I think there's some things that they just gloss over because they're into the story and they're, so that's what you want to get them. And I think there's some things like, even I think a lot of people, some of the references are kind of obscure. So, but if it gets to you, like, a Corey's dog, Potato Chip, is named after a popple, which a kid today might not know what a popple is, but they were these like dolls that looked like weird animals and they turned into balls and they had a cartoon show. So like someone reading that who's our age might be like, oh my God, I remember, how fun. And also Dead Flip plays with nostalgia because a lot of my hobbies, I think, were getting too nostalgic. I still enjoy a lot of obviously nostalgic things, but I think that can be deceptive, and it's really important to be present because sometimes when I think people are very blind to that and they're like, oh, the good old days, kind of like Sam in this book too. It's like, well, who were they good for? Like they weren't good for everybody, So I think playing with that was really fun. And I hope young people enjoy it. I mean, I write for them. So I write for me and I write for them. I think and also I don't know sometimes. It's like being in a vacuum. Like I am on social media, but I have a website, but I just don't really, I guess nobody's commenting and being like, oh my God, you're so great, which is great because that scares me. I don't want people.
I don't want expectations put on me.
But I hope that young people enjoy it and have fun. And it's paying homage to stuff I liked when I was like Sam's age, like Erie, Indiana, Goosebumps.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Stuff like that.
And Goosebumps is still,
still going. Yeah.
Still huge.
Yeah. But thank you for that question.
Still bumping.
Yeah. Dun, 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 dun.
And mentioning what you said earlier about horror and comedy, R.L. Stine, who writes Goosebumps, he started writing out as a kid comedy.
Yeah.
And you're totally right that how they're both like so close together. It's easy to flip it and make it a horror or comedy.
Yep.
All right. For YAMILE and Amparo, did you ask the other contributing authors to write stories to fit the anthology specifically, or did they already have ideas in mind when you told them the premise?
I think, what do you think? I think they were all just original for the anthology, and as far as I know, nobody had the story in their back pocket, just waiting for the opportunity. They just, when we asked them to submit a pitch with the creature that they wanted to write about and what country, everybody was super excited. And so perhaps they did have, like this desire to share about a particular story, but they were all original.
And I think the contributors were the ones who changed the genre for us of the project, because I tweeted about wanting a fantasy anthology, and the tweets in response were more along the lines of horror. And so in speaking with YAMILE, we were like, oh no, we need to do a horror anthology instead of a fantasy one. Because by that time, we were, I think, like the second or third announced project for Latin American contributors, or with Latin American contributors. So we're very much, we still have a long way to go, as you said. So, but yeah, it was originally a fantasy.
Wonderful. All right. And also for you again, what are your favorite monsters in the anthology besides your own?
Oh, that's a good question. I love La Pata Sola. I just love that revenge and the anger turning into action.
I feel like a lot of people asked us, is La Llorona in this? Is El Chupacabra in this? Is El Cuco in this? And we were like, no, because people know about those mainly through movies and shows, and hearsay. But I feel like we were looking for newer, more, not newer because they've been around for a long time, but newer to US audiences, specifically English-speaking readers. So in my case, I really love zombies. My first love is vampires, but my second, and like super like rival, I like right up there is zombies. So definitely Dismembered by Anne Cardinal is a very sad story, as Sarah was mentioning, the decapitated grandma, but fun.
Yes.
Yay.
We have one last question, but it's not even a question. It just says, thank you for being for an amazing anthology.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. I'm sorry. You're welcome.
And then I guess I'm horrible at Spanish. Quiero más?
Quiero más.
Oh, yes.
Más. Yes.
We want more.
More. Then yes. Where's that number 2?
Volume number 2. And Dead Flip 2 as well, because I feel like I have read multiple horror books, or many horror books, but for some reason the ones that get me the most are the ones, like I mentioned earlier, rooted in heart and a friendship story that is as tragic as this one.
No, thanks.
That's where it is. Yeah, that's where it is.
I think too, horror hits more when you care about the horror that it's happening to, right? Like what Stephen King, I think, does so well. I mean, whether you like his stuff or not, I do. I mean, some of it's dated and problematic, but I love him. And I think what he does so well is writing not fully fleshed character, but like in his short stories, he's very good at like giving you a character and what their daily life is like and their inner thoughts and who they are in a community, usually like Castle Rock or whatever. And then the weird thing happens. So it's like all these people. And so then you care more about when the thing happens and how the character transforms.
Definitely.
So, yeah.
We got one last question that just came in that's too good that I can't pass up. So for all of you, what's your favorite horror trope?
Oh, man.
See, that's what I was expecting.
Well, actually, there was one in your anthology. It's one of my favorites. I don't think you can pick one. But
my favorite is in the anthology as well. But yes, go ahead.
Yeah, but like eating something and then it transforms you and changes you.
That is exactly mine.
Yeah. So one of my favorite horror movies from the 80s that some people know, but others don't, is The Stuff. Do you know that film? Anybody?
Yeah, I think I've heard it.
Where like they find this, like marshmallowy goo in the ground. Yeah, like it tastes good. Let's just market it. And it's basically like
what a great idea.
Dark satire about marketing in the 80s. So the idea of eating something and then you are transformed in a way is fun.
I like the one where you know someone and then they start behaving weird and you don't know what's happening to the person, but something feels off. Yeah. I love those stories because it's so sad. Because you're like, oh my gosh, we were married. Why are you acting weird? I'd rather you were unfaithful to me or something. Yeah, like
a body snatcher situation.
Demonic possession, infidelity. I'm going with infidelity.
Oh my gosh, I had nightmares about the body snatchers. I never went to see pumpkins. But for me, it's the one when the character is so obsessed with, fighting a certain monster or evil, and then they turn into that.
Oh, yes.
No, I just love that. I don't know what that's about me.
Those are all good.
When you says you're a Sagittarius, that's what it says.
The deterioration of somebody's character. And
yes,
I love it.
Well, we have hit almost the hour mark, but I have one last question for you all. Where can people find you on social media so they can see what you're up to? In fact, actually, tied into that too, what are you currently working on maybe that you would like to plug or mention?
Oh, gosh. Well, for horror fans and also anthology fans, I don't know when it's coming out, but I'll have a short story in a book that the working title is Night of the Living Queers.
I've heard of that one, yes.
So it's horror, and it'll be about a drive-in movie theater that has some visitors that shouldn't be there. And then My Buddy Killer Croc came out.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
A DC graphic novel. And this is for 8 and 12, not so scary. But speaking of Karate Kid, like if a kid, like maybe Daniel LaRusso didn't have a Mr. Miyagi, but had a Gotham supervillain as a wrestling mentor. And then in February with Scholastic, I have a book called Opportunity Knocks, and it's a middle grade novel. And that one's fun and whimsical and not scary at all. And if you'd like to follow me on social media, though, it stresses me out. I'm at Sara.Farizan, and my website is www.sarafarizan.com. So you can find all the stuff there. And I hope to keep working and get more jobs and inspiration. Otherwise, I don't know. I'll look for another job in the spring, I think. But
no, don't do that.
No, thank you. That means a lot because I'm like, is anybody reading? I don't know.
Of course.
Absolutely. Yes. Well, in my case, I am at Amparo_Ortiz on Instagram and Twitter. And on TikTok, I am at Amparo_Ortiz_author. Because my original handle was taken by someone named like me. And in terms of what I'm working on, currently I am under contract for a comic project.
Oh, fun.
Or in the graphic novel space. I can't tell you what it is yet, but it's coming. The announcement is coming. And in March, I'm launching my next YA book. It is a fantasy set in Puerto Rico. It is called Last Sunrise in Eterna. And Eterna is a very small island inhabited by elves. So we have Boricua elves right next door to me. Yay! And so that one is about a goth girl who hates elves but must infiltrate their island because the youngest prince kidnapped her mom because she stole elf corpses. So now they're like mad at her.
Love it.
Oh, of course.
Of course.
Well, I'm YAMILE S. Méndez everywhere. My website, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. Although I'm horrible at TikTok. I tried like a week, and I'm too tired for this. I'm not Amparo is amazing at TikTok, so I'm like, I'll just let Amparo.
Oh, that's a very good compliment because I'm very I wouldn't say shy, but yeah, thank you.
No, you're incredible. I'm like, oh my gosh, so cringe. But I have my 4th horse country book coming out in February, No Place Like Home, which is unbelievable to think that the 4th book will come out. 3 of them came out this year. And that's a lot of work in 2021.
Unbelievable.
I almost died, but
she doesn't sleep.
Yes. And I'm working on a middle grade that's not announced yet. And then on some secret things, again, our agents here are just, playing around and having fun and see where they go. And that one is kind of a horror. So hopefully.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. We hope that you can buy these books if you haven't yet already through Mysterious Galaxy, preferably. Get those signed book plates and definitely pre-order some of those books that they just mentioned right now. That'd be very good, too.
That'd be awesome.
Thank you for having us, Mysterious Galaxy. And thank you. It was so great to meet you. And thanks, everybody, for coming. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you all for making this possible. Have a good night, everyone. See you next time.
Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween.
Bye.
Bye.